Okay, here we go. This is Jacob Schmitt with deerhuntingschool.com looking at this property here. Chris, thank you for letting me look at your property. I really enjoyed talking with you on the phone and everything. I'm just going to look at this property here for those of you that's just watching this on YouTube, and just take a look at it, and we'll talk about some food plot placement and some spots that I think would be good to hunt, and some strategies that should work well in a situation like this here. Now, what we have, let me zoom out just a little here. We've got some ag fields down in this area. We've got some up in this area here. Okay. The property that we're looking at is runs. I didn't do the border on it, but it runs like this here. Kind of cuts up like that there. Okay, so Chris, I appreciate it, and we're going to go ahead and get started here looking at it. One thing I do like, I'm going to zoom in on your one field. Now, I know we kind of talked about this on the phone briefly, but you have the food plot here. I'm going to pull out the pin, okay? From my understanding, you get part of this here food plot here. Wouldn't hurt to expand that a little, maybe here, and then you can plant your other stuff out here. Basically giving these deer a year-round food source. You're going to be battling with the cows at all times, but so anyways, okay, so now one thing here, and we had talked about a little bit as well. If you'll look here, I'm zooming in here, and I'm going to zoom out again. I'm sorry, I'm moving the screen so much, everybody, but I'm going to zoom out here just a little. But your idea of catching these deer, staging back in here, especially with the selective cutting that they're doing. They're doing a selective cut, for those of you that don't know, all over this entire property. That's going to allow all this area to grow up, and you're going to have a lot of deer bedding on this property and spending a lot of time on this property. And then obviously, especially early season, these deer will head towards these fields and stuff to feed. Now on your outline you sent me, this part of this little field here is included. Just a little spot of this field here is included in that. So this would be, this southern part would be a good area to catch these deer. Now one thing, and I'm zooming out again, one thing I want you to think about, Chris, is the fact that these ag fields are only going to be here for a certain period of time. If you can get food on your property for that late season, especially in some of these bigger fields, that'll supply some good food source, like this field here, If you could get one of them, and you can have a pretty good sized food source that'll sustain quite a few deer during that time, them will be good hunting plots here. Okay, now one thing I wanted to mention is these small fields here. You see these small fields here. Deer feel a lot more secure in the daytime in smaller fields than they do big, large fields. And these fields are completely surrounded by woods, completely surrounded by cover. These fields here are as well. And you had mentioned that you hunted, up here completely, and you never come down in here. So these deer are going to feel a lot more secure down in this area because there's no pressure on them. Now, obviously, you're going to have neighbors hunting and stuff as well. So I'm going to zoom back in here and get this angle a little different because there's something else I want to talk about when you were talking about food plots. This is a hilly terrain. Obviously, you know that. But one thing about hills is it's tough to hunt the wind, you know, when you're on the side of a hill or whatever, because the wind hits hills and it swirls and what have you. So, you know, basically, let me get, it's a pain to get this thing angle right on this thing the way I want it. Let me get this angle out here like that. That's what I'm wanting to do. And zoom in a little bit. Okay, so, and now this here's off your property, but I'm just going to talk about this to give you an example of what I'm talking about real quick. Okay, let's go back here. I'm going to pull up our highlighter. Let's just say your stand's down here, you know, kind of on the side of this hill. We're just going to say in this instance, for, you know, we've got a south east wind, no, southwest wind. Okay, so the wind's blowing like this here. Okay, it's going to take our scent into this hill, and then it's just going to kind of swirl down in this area and down in this bottom or whatever. Now let's just say you have, you know, northwest wind. It's going to take your scent, boom, and it's just going to swirl here. If it's this other direction, it's going to take our scent, and it's just going to swirl all over the place. So basically, when you have hills, they can be hunted, but the problem is that it gives the deer a lot better advantage with the, you know, them busting you out if you're hunting on the bottom of them hills. Now, let's just say you notice here, this is a kind of a peak here. This is a really high spot, so it's kind of low where I drew that yellow. Now, if you have a stand here and you have a, you know, northeast wind here, it's going to take your scent out over the top of all this, and your scent cone's going to be in. Let me erase some of this. It's getting a mess. Okay, so we have our scent on our stand on top of this hill, and we have a northwest wind. Well, it's going to pick your scent up and it's going to blow it out over the top of this valley, you know, for one, and the deer are going to be way below you. But it's also going to be a true wind. You're not going to have to worry about it bouncing off these hills and blowing in huge areas, to where if it's down here on the side of these valleys, you know, like here, and, you know, let's just say we have a straight south wind, it's going to hit this hill and it's going to do this. Okay. And not only the fact it's going to run up this draw here, you know, the only spot that's not going to get your scent is straight downwind. Okay, and then obviously on the upwind side for a short distance, because even here, you know, if thermals and stuff get right and it's carrying that scent upward, you may get, you know, the wind on downwind side of you. So it's giving the deer a huge advantage to whether if you're on top of a hill. And the reason I want to talk about that is the fact of your food plots, your hunting plots. You wouldn't really want a hunting plot on the side of one of these ridges, to where you're set up on the side of it. If you can get them on the top where you can get the true wind, then you're going to be able to hunt it better with the wind. That's the reason I wanted to talk about this here. So any of you guys that's watching this here, if you're putting in food plots, and you, Chris, you want to keep that in mind, especially in this hilly terrain. You've got some good fields that are up on the top of these hills, and them small fields are going to be really good hunting plots. You know, so that's where you want your stands, because it's going to be in your food plots. If you're going to hunt them, you might as well set them up where you can have the best advantage. Okay, and I'm just going to take, you know, just real quick and just kind of point out some of them areas on this. Now, one thing I will mention here on Google Earth. Google Earth is not 100% true on the layout of these hills and stuff. They're not 100% accurate where they are. Topos are a lot more accurate. I use topo maps when I do the downloadable video analysis, But the reason I don't use them on the YouTube ones because it discloses everything. I mean, it shows the roads, names, everything. It shows all kinds of stuff. So I don't use that on that. I just messed my angle up. So on these food plots that you're talking about putting in, and get my angle right. Let me zoom in here. If this is the true, I apologize, I'm having issues with this thing here. If you notice this hill here, we've got a hill here. This is kind of the peak, and then this is a lower point. So that would be exactly, if you were to take and put this food plot here, I wish I could get my angle right. I apologize. If you were to put your food plot here, you're gonna and you were to hunting here or here, you're gonna have that wind swirling, rather than if you was to have your food plot here in an area like this on the top of this hill. If you see that, you can see it here. You know, this is where it drops off. If Google Earth is true here, and a lot of times it is, but sometimes it's not. But you get the point for sure. A hunting plot would be much better here than here because you're not going to get that true wind. If you're here, you could even set two stands for a northern wind and a southern wind. You could actually, you know, set your stands on a southerly wind. You could set your stand in this area since this is downhill, and then you could a north wind. I'm sorry, a north wind. And then you could let your scent on a north wind on here, because this is downhill of this big time. You could have a stand here blowing your scent out over the top of this and into this open field, which is less likely for deer to be here anyways, especially if you have a food plot set here, okay? And you let, on a northerly wind, let your scent blow and use that side of that hill, blow out into this open field, and then you have your food plot here, and you're going to have true wind as well. To where if you tried it down here, and I'm just going to say this again, and you was to set your stand here, and you had a south wind and it blows into this hill, it's going to swirl bad on you. It may not swirl back here as much because it looks like this is kind of the ridge here, but you would actually, your scent would end up being upwind of you, which is going to make it very difficult. So now, okay, so spots that I would put food plots, this one here would be a good one. And we zoom in here, and you notice this is the valley, and this is the upper part. So this here would be a good spot to put food plots. This wouldn't be a real good spot. This would be a decent spot. You could put food plots on the side of these hills, but they wouldn't be real good hunting plots unless you were gun hunting or something. If you're trying to get really close on the deer, you're going to have a tough time because of the wind swirling on you. But as far as when I talk with you on the phone, you had mentioned that you're really after good deer with a bow. Okay, so these smaller fields on top of these hills are going to be your best spots. Okay, here and here, them are going to be your best spots for food plots. Okay, and like you have here, it's a great. Matter of fact, let's just zoom in here and I'll show you. This is great because it's on top of the hill. You've got a true wind. If they say you got a northwest wind, as long as the weathermen are right, and as long as it's not one of them days where the wind's blowing every which direction, within a 2-minute period that it could possibly blow. And if you've hunted very long, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They say, well, it's going to be a northwest wind. 5 seconds it blows southwest. Another 5 seconds it blows northwest, east, every which direction it can possibly blow within a 1 minute span, and your scent's going every which way. So this is very true. Good spot for food plot. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, and it's tough because you're going to have the you've got the cows on the property. Okay, but getting food plots. But you had asked about food plots, so I'm going to talk about that, quite a bit here. If you could possibly, and we had talked about the fence, how you could put the fence. You could put the electric fence, a single row fence to keep the cows out of the field, out of your food plot. You could put a single electric fence where the deer will actually jump it, but the cows won't come in it, and the deer will utilize the food plot, and then the cows won't. You could do that. Okay. One thing about food plots in any food source, that's going to be a preferred food source. And late season, you're really gonna have all the deer, especially where you're at here, because you're gonna have some brutal weather. Now, when these crops and stuff, you can catch them staging like we talked about a little bit on the phone. But you really, if you can get one of these, at least one of these big fields or one of these areas, these big open areas, acre, 2 acres, and get that thing planted. In a year-round food source where the deer can use it and keep the cows out, where what you have is this here, where you have your main food plot, and it's not really a hunting plot. It's just really to feed the deer, because what you want is these deer moving like this. You want them moving towards that. Say they're bedded here, moving towards that. Okay. A lot of times they're not going to reach this until after dark. Okay. You do that, and then you set up these smaller food plots for hunting plots here. And then I think there was another one here. I know I'm zoomed out kind of bit, but let me change colors on that. Okay, then you have these smaller food plots to where you're hunting these, and this is just for the deer. Okay, and then on top of these ridges, they were pretty close to where there was a couple. Okay, because what happens, let's say the deer's bedded here, gets up, moves towards the main food source. He's going to be here most of the time when it's dark. It's not going to be they'll get there sometime, but the more older, mature deer are going to get here before dark. But you get these smaller food plots tucked back towards the bedding area, and that deer steps out into that food plot while it's still shooting light a lot, on his way to the main food source. And then in the morning, leaves here before dark, boom. And then also, with these food plots being satellite food plots, during the rut, as these bucks are really cruising, they're going to be they're going to circle downwind of all this, and they'll hit them food plots on their way cruising, looking for does and stuff. And, let's just say here's the south wind. He's cruising. He's going to be on the downwind side. He's going to scent check out this whole area. They're more apt to come out into them smaller plots. This here would be a good example of that. If you had a big food source here, you could even do this, and I know this would be a lot to put in. But then you could put your hunting plots in these smaller fields here. Okay, and then there's another one here that's a smaller field. These are your hunting plots here, and these are just food plots. Okay, if you've done that, then you create a funnel down the center of that. And I'm going to zoom out and I'll show you that. There's actually a funnel already there. But if this is a food source, so you could actually, if you set it up here, where this is just your year-round food source here, and then you have a hunting plot here, you could have a stand, hunting plot here, you could have a stand or even two, and right in the middle there's that tree line. That would be a good spot for a stand. So you could set 3 or 4 stands up on this situation here as these deer are drawn to there. You know, drawn to there from different directions. They're going to hit these smaller plots, and they're more apt to hit them during the daytime and during shooting light. Okay, now another spot I think is going to be really good is this pond, especially with this being really hilly area. Now I know there's water here and there's water here. You know, there's water here. But with this being really hilly and them doing all that selective cutting they're doing, this stuff's going to get thick undergrowth. You're going to have a lot of deer bedding in there, especially that early bow season, or when them deer, on them unseasonably warm days, things like that, with that thick stuff around that pond, all the way around this pond here. The deer will use this pond a lot in the daytime. In the evenings, a lot of times, especially because they're going to be on them warm days where it's hot, they're going to be bedded closer to that water because they're going to need that water on them, especially early bow season when it's unseasonably hot. When it's hot, they're going to really need that water that you have here. And the thing is, they're bedded close. The very first thing they hit is that water. It's going to be a good spot for a stand. The only thing I haven't looked at here is the topography on that. You know, you may have to be really careful how you hunt that, depending on the how steep that is there. You know, what wind directions you hunt it. I really, honestly, here in Arkansas, I set most of my stands up, my pond stands up, for southerly winds, because of the fact that most of the time when I'm hunting them, it's unseasonably warm. That pond looks like it's sitting in a bowl here. It's going to be kind of tough to hunt, it looks like, because you're going to have some of that swirling going on. Okay. One thing, if you can figure out, and this is something that I learned, and I'm just going to briefly talk about it. I'm not going to tell exactly, because it'd take a long time. I'm going to explain great details on this. But one thing on ponds, if you can figure out, say the buck's particularly coming here, he's watering here, you know, for the most part, he's watering on this side of the pond, maybe it's there or whatever. If you can hunt the side that he's going to be on, you hunt on the side he's on, you're going to be better off. You can hunt it with a southerly wind, let your scent blow into the pond, across the pond. That's one thing. But another thing is, it's harder for him to see you. It's easier for him to see you if he's on the opposite side of the pond that you're on. And the reason for that is you're giving him double image. I don't know if anybody's noticed this, but if you're standing in a pond, you can't see. If you stand in a pond and you look down at the water, you don't see the reflection from the side you're on. You see the reflection from the other side. So basically, if there's a pond here and I'm standing here facing the pond, I see everything that's on this side mirroring into this here. If I look into that water, I don't see anything like somebody was to walk up behind me. I'm not going to see their reflection here. I'm going to see it from out here, you know, until they get really close. So you're giving him your reflection. Any movement that you make is he's got your movement here and in the water. So that's the deal there. But I think that pond's going to be a good spot, especially bow. You should be able to shoot plumb across it, no problem. And then here, matter of fact, let's just measure that thing real fast. Yep. A little long if you're shooting that way, but I think there's no doubt, you can shoot there. There's 24. Boom. And obviously, if you're hunting here and the buck comes up right there, you definitely get a shot there. So if you're going to do a management program on this, as far as putting in food plots, things like that, you want to keep your hunting plots up on the higher ground. Obviously, you can, your feeding plots, if you're putting in feeding plots to just attract deer to the property, keep your numbers up on your property. Your big fields doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You can put it on the low ground. You're not going to be hunting them. But your ones up high are definitely going to be your better hunting plots. Okay, I would personally, if you can find a big field that's up high, I would like to be able to hunt my feeding plot occasionally if I chose to. So it obviously would work better if you could keep it up high. This one here looks like a good setup. Right now, seems like it's just you hunting. You're not going to need a whole bunch, but you get multiple people hunting, like you had talked about. You get some more guys, some of your nieces, nephews, kids, or whatever hunting. You may want to get, even a couple areas where these deer are coming to, where you have a feeder plot and some satellite plots around it, satellite hunting plots around it. Okay. Now the funnel I was talking about is this strip right here. That would be a good spot for a stand if there was food plots here, because these bucks are going to use that funnel, especially when there's does out into these food plots. If there's hunting pressure, they're going to hold tight to that cover, scent checking and things like that. They'll use that funnel quite a bit. And if he comes down that field edge and things like that. Now, funnels on this property, other than with the topography, your ridges, the bucks will like cruising the ridges. A lot of times they like to just hug the kind of the side. They don't like walking dead center. I like kind of walking the side of it just a little bit, kind of towards the top or whatever. I don't know. I think it's a visual thing. I think they're trying to hide themselves or whatever. Really, the only funnels you have is really here. And it's not that huge of a funnel because, the deer, if a deer's coming here, it's just as well to take care. It's not like if you have just this massive open area like you had here. If you had this huge area here with a pretty good wood line running through the middle of it here. I was looking for a funnel like I'm talking about real quick without searching the whole world. And I don't see one. Like here's a better example of it. Deer coming from here to here. This is a pretty big open field here, so they'd be more apt to take this area here. You don't really have a lot of that. I might have to zoom out a little bit, find the boundaries. You don't have a lot of that. So, anyways, one thing I like is the selective cutting that they're doing on this property. That is going to draw a lot of deer from the neighboring properties and stuff around here, because of the fact it's going to be thick. It's going to have a lot of undergrowth and a lot of food, depending on how heavy they cut it. It's going to really, really help. One thing, if you had any control of it, maybe in the future or whatever, if you could spread it out where it's not all cut at the exact same time, let them selectively cut it. Maybe down the road, as it's time to do it again, 4 or 5 years, have them do one area, here, and then let me draw that out. Okay, say the property here, maybe have them selective cut, this area, 5 years from now, again, do it again, and then come down here at this bottom area here and do it 5 years from that, and then maybe, this area, here, 5 years from that or whatever. And the reason that you want to do that is it causes diversity. Okay, when they very first cut it, it's not going to be a whole lot of undergrowth. It's going to be really young, tender young undergrowth the first year. Okay, they're going to have really just pretty much nothing but a food source. They're going to have a lot of food. After 4 or 5 years, it's going to get really thick, and the deer are really bad in it. The problem is if the entire property is the same and it's massively thick, the deer can bed anywhere they want. Okay, if this here was a 5-year-old cut, I know the deer is going to bed in there. If this was a first-year cut, they're going to bed here and they're going to feed here. Okay, and if this here was a 3-year cut, or 10-year cut, this here's a 10-year cut, then I know that the deer are probably not going to bed here so much as they are here. They're going to, well, no, that 10 years, they'll probably still be bedding here pretty good, because it's going to be still pretty thick, but it's going to be pretty close to being needed to be done again, kind of deal. So it keeps the deer spread out, it keeps diversity on the property, things like that, and then your food plots. But one other thing I want to talk about real quick is this here, what I really see that's going to happen on this property. Okay, you got your property, and this isn't the exact layout, but it's somewhat close. Run something like that. It's pretty close. Actually, I think this actually comes over something like that. It may even go up like that. Whatever it is, it's pretty close to there. What's going to happen, they're going to selective cut this entire area. The very first year, you said they're leaving the tops and everything. You're going to have some deer bed in them tops, but you're going to have a lot of deer on these neighboring properties, especially in the early season, feeding on your property. They're going to be feeding. They're going to bed in some of them tops. They're really going to find that there's a lot of food here. So a lot of deer is going to end up taking home on this property. Let me zoom out. Here. I'm going to erase all that. We're going to zoom out. I want to really explain this. Because a deer's home range is about average size of a deer's home range is about a square mile. Okay, and that that's 1 mile there. So a square that size, we're talking, a square here. That's the average size of a deer's home range. Pretty good area here that we're talking about. Here, it's a pretty good area. Okay, what you're going to have are them deer as they roam and they do their thing. When they cross your property, they're going to figure out, hey, this property has a better habitat than these neighboring properties, and you're going to have a lot more deer. It's going to happen the first year a little bit. After a couple years go by, you're going to really notice it, because these deer are going to breed. some of the deer that find that and they're going to call your property their main area, they're going to breed, they're going to have babies and things like that, and you're going to notice more and more deer on the property. And the reason for that is this here, okay? And let me zoom out again before I do this. This is the reason, and this is pretty neat here. Okay, this area down here, the agriculture area here, it'll support 80. Well, obviously, I mean, they got to have some cover, so it comes up into this area. This will support about 80 deer per square mile with the cover. So we got to take, include some of this cover. It's actually a bigger area than that. But the agriculture area will support about 80 deer per square mile because of the food. This area over here, this square mile over here, if it looks to be just pure mature forest, will support like 20, 30 deer per square mile. 30 deer per square mile, 20 to 30 deer per square mile. Okay, your property here, and I know it's not a square mile, but you just got to think it's a third of a square mile. Okay, your property here, which I know that's not the property line, just getting the point here. Your property, after it's been cut thin like this, is going to support, probably 80 to 100 deer per square mile. Okay, a clear cut, 80 to 100 deer per square mile, with because of all the undergrowth and stuff. Now, a clear cut here, say this is just a clear cut, and it's a square mile clear cut, will support 100 to 125 deer per square mile. With what they need. The problem with this agriculture field, actually the problem with this agriculture field, if it was actually this, nothing but agriculture, it might support a couple deer if they got some good cornfields and stuff to bed in. But it's about 0 deer per square mile without the cover, because you have to have the cover. Okay, so an area like that would support 50 to 80 deer per square mile because of the food. But without the cover, you have nothing. Deer need food, cover, and water. 3 things they need. Your property here, when it was a mature forest, had cover, had water because we got the pond. One thing it didn't have was very much food. And a lot of guys get all wound up on oak trees, oak trees, oak trees. Don't cut the oak trees, 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 because my deer have to have acorns. The problem with that is them acorns are only around for about 1 month, and them big, huge oak trees are shading everything underneath it where the deer can't get their mouths on anything. If you cut a lot of them oak trees like they're doing, that undergrowth comes up. That stuff's knee high the first year. The second year it's waist to chest high or whatever. For the next 5, 6, 7 years, that the deer can put their mouths on all that new growth, and they can eat that stuff. That is the reason that your property is going to support so many more deer, because they're going to have an abundance of food. They're going to have an abundance of cover, and they don't need a whole boatload of water. It's not like they have to live in swamp. They just need a little bit of water, because deer get 80-90% of their water from what they eat, depending on what time of year it is. So they have, and they have water. That pond's plenty of water. So they have everything they need. Down here, they have an abundance of food. Now we're talking about we're talking about an area like this, just the field. Okay, the deer have an abundance amount of food. Is this water here? So they have a lot of water, and they have no cover. So it would support almost 0 deer per square mile if you didn't have cover. Now you add this section here in, here, and you have the cover, so then we can bump that up and we got deer per square mile. Okay, and then the clear cut, if there's water nearby or the deer can get to water, then they have lots of food, lots of cover, and lots of water. This forest, what your property was last deer season, other than the fields, you had the fields and stuff, there was food in there, but the mature forest, which was 90% of your property here, would support 20 to 30 deer because it only had food 1 month out of the year other than the fields. And there's a little browse through there, but the deer like browse. They're going to have more browse than they can eat on your property. And they're going to have the cover and the water, and they're going to figure that out, and you're going to have a lot of deer. It's that simple. Okay, now your destination spots is what you need to find. Get you some food plots set in there. Some of them smaller food plots, I think you'll be fine, especially for the next 4 or 5 years, because you're going to have, or maybe 6, 7 years even, if they cut it enough, you're going to have a bunch of food. You just need destination spots. You're going to have plenty of cover. You've got the water. Okay, you can hunt the water. That's a destination spot inside all this cover and inside all this food. You're going to put in your small food plots, get them hunting plots in, get them set up for your different wind directions, make sure they're up high, hunt them dudes there. They're going to be destination spots for the deer to come to that are bedded in your area. These deer that are bedded in here, these deer that are mingling through all this, they're just going to kind of wander and feed and stuff. These little small plots and these plots that you have in here are going to be destination plots. That's what you need to look for on your property, is destination spots, and that's going to be the water, them little food plots that you have set up here and there, and hunt them. Destination spots and them rub lines and stuff in between them. That is a good game plan. I think the property is going to be fantastic when they get done with this cutting, and that stuff starts to regrow. Okay. If I was hunting the property, I would be ecstatic about them cutting it. A lot of guys get totally upset when they go in and log and stuff. And it may hurt, it may change the deer's pattern for a little bit, and it may hurt for, a month or so. If they come in November and clear cut your woods, it may hurt for, the first season because there's nothing there but dirt. But that following season, that new growth is going to come up, and it's going to come up nice, tender, young growth, and the deer are going to love eating it. And they're going to use it basically for a natural food plot, and then, it keeps on going from there. So, anyways, Chris, I hope you enjoyed this video here. Hope anyone else that's seen this video, that sees this video on YouTube, enjoys it and learns something from it. I appreciate you, Chris. And if you have any questions or whatever, email me. And I'll be glad to, help you out best I can. I think you're going to have some fun hunting this property as the deer really start finding it, because you're going to have a property that can hold 80 to 100 deer per square mile with, properties surrounding you that can't hold near that number of deer. So you're going to have a lot of deer on your property coming through it. Because basically you have these areas are a little higher than 20 to 30 because of the fields. These fields are going to have the edges and edge features and stuff like that. But like this area, there's no edges, anything. It's not going to support almost very few deer, maybe 20 at the most per square mile if there was no edge features where you had diversity and stuff like that. You're going to have tons of diversity on your property. You already have all the field edges where you have the edges and things like that. So the power lines, you got the power line, the gas line, whatever. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it helps you out. Have a good day. Bye-bye.